I woke up to the sound of whispering, not the kind you strain to hear, the kind meant for you to miss. But I was never a heavy sleeper, not even now, tethered to oxygen and fed broth in plastic bowls. The voices came from just outside the hospital curtain, low, urgent, unkind. She's still hanging on. Jesus Christ. That was my son. A silence followed. Then his wife's voice, sharper, as if embarrassed. Keep it down, Michael. She's not deaf. Another pause. Then his words came again, softer but with a coldness I hadn't heard before. Why is she still alive? That was the moment. Not the moment my heart broke, that had happened years ago, but the moment something inside me stopped waiting. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blink. I just lay there, still as the cotton gown draped over my bony chest, and listened as they walked away. I must have fallen asleep afterward, because when I opened my eyes again, the sun was bleeding through the pale blue curtains and a nurse was checking my IV line. Morning, sweetheart, she said, cheerful but not too much. You slept better. Her name tag read Carla. She looked to be in her mid-30s, clear eyes, brown ponytail, skin the color of toasted almonds. I didn't know her long, but I liked how she moved, calm, confident, no wasted steps. She reminded me of someone who used to matter to me once, when I still mattered to others. I smiled faintly. Did you hear them? She paused, confused. Hear who, hon? My son and his wife. Carla's gaze sharpened, but she didn't press. I turned toward the window. It's nothing. Just ghosts with wedding rings. Carla chuckled softly, brushing a stray hair behind my ear. I'll be back in a bit. Let's get you some tea later. Yeah? I nodded. Tea sounded nice. A ritual without questions. When my husband died, I thought grief was the sharpest pain I'd ever feel. I was wrong. It wasn't grief. It was outliving your welcome. After Frank's funeral, Michael and his wife had insisted I move in. Your family, he'd said. We won't let you be alone. It was all warm hugs and casseroles at first. I should have known better. Love, when transactional, always expires. That was 3 years ago. 1 mild stroke and 2 hospital visits later, I became more burdened than mother. The guest bedroom turned into a storage space. I was relocated to a hospital bed in their den, stripped of privacy and presence. Easier access, they claimed. For whom? Certainly not me. I kept a notebook hidden under my pillow, the kind with floral corners and thick pages that soak up ink. I used to write grocery lists in it. Now I wrote things like, Feb 18. Michael said he was too tired to drive me to therapy. Feb 24. Found my medication organizer empty. Carla refilled it for me. Mar 3. Ashley said I'd outlived her patience. That afternoon, Carla returned with a cup of chamomile and a pack of vanilla creamers I didn't ask for, but loved. You remembered, I said, surprised. You told me on Monday, when you were cranky. I smirked. Must have been the steroids. We sat in silence for a while. She perched on the edge of the chair beside the bed, scrolling through her tablet, occasionally glancing at my vitals. Do you have kids? I asked. She shook her head. Nope, just a parrot named Sam who hates everyone but me. Smart bird. Carla smiled, but her eyes stayed on the screen. I hesitated, then asked, do you think some people just run out of use? Her eyes lifted slowly. What do you mean? Like past their expiry date? Like yogurt? She tilted her head. No, I think people just get tired of pretending to care. That's different. I watched her carefully, surprised by the honesty. Carla wasn't afraid of silence. Most people filled it. She let it stretch like fabric until it I need your help, I said finally. She blinked. With what? I want to get some papers from home. A red folder in my top drawer. Can you get it for me? I'd need permission, she said cautiously. I still have power of attorney. For now. She studied me a moment. Are you sure this is what you want? I didn't blink. Yes. She nodded once. Firm. Then I'll get it after shift. Tell me where exactly. And just like that, I had an ally. Not a savior, not a daughter, but someone who still saw me as more than dying skin and a medical file. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling, hands clasped over my stomach beneath the scratchy hospital blanket. Michael hadn't returned. Ashley neither. Maybe they'd finally given up the charade of concern. I didn't mind. I wasn't planning on waiting for them to come back. I thought of Carla, of the way she didn't wince when I coughed or flinch when I asked for help. I thought of the red folder, bank statements, property deeds, the unsigned will I'd rewritten after the first stroke. They expected my silence. They were about to learn I hadn't died quietly. Carla returned the next evening, after her shift. She didn't bring flowers or soft words, just the red folder, held like a secret, tucked beneath her coat. It was lightly worn, creased at the corners, a small coffee stain on the back, but I recognized it immediately. She sat beside me, her voice low. I parked in the staff lot, nobody saw. "Thank you," I whispered. She placed the folder in my lap with care, her hand resting briefly over mine, warm, steady, and then she stood to give me privacy, drawing the curtain closed without being asked. I opened the folder slowly, like unsealing a coffin. Inside were 23 years of documentation, financial transfers, a revised living trust, and a recent draft of my will, unsigned, incomplete, but intact. I had rewritten it after the second time Michael forgot my birthday. After he called the power company to cancel my old apartment's final bill and asked why I still kept a checking account just in your name. That's when I knew he was watching my balances, not my health. In the bottom sleeve was a short letter I'd written in pencil, barely legible now. "If I am not seen in this house, let me be seen in the decisions I leave behind." Back then I thought of it as a note to the lawyer, but as I reread it, I realized it was a prayer, a tiny one. To no one in particular. Just a plea that the woman I once was wouldn't dissolve into the shell they'd reduced me to. Carla returned 10 minutes later with a fresh cup of tea. "Still want to go through with this?" "Yes," I said, voice stronger than yesterday. "And I want you to witness the signature." She hesitated. "You sure you want me to be in this at all? You know what they'll say if this gets out?" I looked her in the eye. "You're the only one who's spoken to me like I still have a voice. That counts." She nodded, exhaled, and retrieved a clipboard and pen from her nurse station bag. "I've already printed a fresh version of the will. You just tell me where you want the names." I gave her mine first, and then hers. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. I wasn't leaving her everything. That wasn't the point, but I was granting her executor authority, because I trusted her more than anyone who'd sat beside my hospital bed, pretending to care. Then came the big one. I crossed out Michael's name, completely. Not even $1 in good faith. He wouldn't get a cent, or a reason. Carla read my silence. "You're not doing this for revenge," she said. "Are you?" I folded my hands. "No, I'm doing it to reclaim the last decision they don't get to make for me." She didn't smile, but I saw the respect in her stillness. 2 days passed without a word from Michael or Ashley. The nurse on duty in the morning said they'd called to check my vitals. Not me, just my numbers. Like reading a thermostat. I didn't expect flowers. But I didn't expect nothing. That silence did more than sting. It clarified, and clarity, I've learned, is the cruelest gift. Carla visited during her breaks now. She started bringing small things I liked. Salted biscuits, a folded crossword, even a lavender sachet that reminded me of the old linen drawer from my first house. "It helps you sleep," she said, placing it near the pillow. I didn't have the heart to tell her that sleep hadn't come easy since the night Michael looked through me like a deadline he missed. That Saturday, a social worker named Randall came into my room. Clean-shaven, pleasant, but polished in the way people get when they're trying to say something without saying it. "I wanted to check in, Mrs. Lewin," he began. "Your son requested a mental capacity review." My hands went cold. "Excuse me?" Randall coughed into his sleeve. "It's not a formal complaint yet. He said he's worried you're being unduly influenced." I laughed once. Bitter. "By whom? The woman who wipes my mouth? Or the one who filed my paperwork after he forgot to?" Randall held up a hand. "I'm not here to accuse. I just need to verify your decision-making is intact. It's routine." I motioned for my folder. "You want routine? I've got documentation back to 1997. Passwords, POAs, account logs. Read them, and tell me if I sound like a woman who can't tell the difference between kindness and theft." Randall's expression changed slightly, not surprise, but recognition. He had expected someone softer, someone broken. "I'll note your competency," he said, standing. This won't go anywhere unless he files something official. I nodded. And if he does, I'll meet him in court with my faculties intact. When he left, Carla came in moments later. She didn't ask, just saw the red in my cheeks and placed a cool hand against them. They're getting nervous, I said. She pulled the curtain closed again. Let them. That night, I wrote a second letter. Not to Carla, not to Michael, to myself. You are not a burden. You are not a number. You are not just a bed and a chart and a date of birth. You are a woman who built a family, lost a husband, outlived a lie, and still found breath to fight. If they won't remember you as you were, they will remember the consequence of forgetting. On Tuesday morning, Michael arrived. Not with flowers, not with a gentle tone. He walked into my hospital room like someone bracing for a legal hearing, not a visit with his mother. He wore a polo shirt tucked too tightly into pressed jeans, and he brought with him a smell of expensive aftershave and something sour beneath it, fear. You asked for time, he said, skipping any preamble. I didn't ask for anything, I said calmly, folding the blanket tighter around my shoulders. You just stopped showing up. He exhaled, as if he were doing something burdensome. Look, I'm not trying to fight. I heard you changed your will. I didn't confirm or deny. Instead, I stared at the red folder on the windowsill behind me. He followed my gaze and laughed once. Bitter. Really? Is this how it's going to be now? You're letting the nurse manipulate you out of everything? She didn't manipulate me, I said. She held my hand when I couldn't reach the call button. She made sure I ate when you forgot I needed dinner. She listened when no one else would. Michael crossed his arms. She's just doing her job. Then maybe you should have done yours as my son. The words fell between us like a dropped tray in a quiet cafeteria. He blinked. So what? Now you're cutting me off because I didn't bring you enough soup? No, I said. I'm cutting you off because I stopped being your mother and started being your inheritance. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look away. Just like that, the space between us, once filled with birthdays and bedtime stories, felt like a courtroom aisle. I'm not signing anything over to you, I said. And I'm not dying on your schedule. He left without a word, his silence louder than the closing door. 10 minutes later, Carla walked in. She didn't need to ask how it went. She could read the tension in my jaw. He came in swinging, I said, but left empty-handed. Carla didn't smile. You okay? I'm tired, I said. But yes. She nodded and began checking my vitals in silence. I'd like to move forward with everything, I said. Legally. I want the lawyer to have it all by Friday. No more waiting. I'll make the calls, she said, and I'll get the notary back. She paused before leaving. He'll fight this, you know? I know, I said, but I'm not afraid of the fight. I'm afraid of disappearing quietly. That afternoon, I wrote letters. One to the estate attorney, finalizing my wishes and leaving detailed instructions. One to the hospital administrator, officially requesting Carla as my primary care nurse when available, and a final one to Michael. I didn't sugarcoat it. This is not punishment. This is preservation. I loved you long past when you stopped loving me, but I won't let you edit the end of my story. I left it unsigned. Some words don't need a name to matter. On Wednesday the notary returned. Carla stood behind me. As I signed everything, her presence didn't loom, it anchored me. Any regrets? She asked softly. I looked down at the ink drying on the paper, only that I didn't see him clearly sooner. That evening, a manila envelope arrived at the hospital, addressed to me. No return address, just a printed label. Inside was a stack of documents from a law firm Michael had used years ago to refinance his house. It included a draft of a power of attorney petition, citing concerns over recent cognitive decline, dated 2 days ago. He was trying to reverse everything, using paperwork to smother my last ounce of control. I handed it to Carla wordlessly. She skimmed it, her lips tightening. I can have the hospital legal team look at this. No, I said. Send it to James, the estate attorney. He needs to see it first. Carla looked at me. They're coming after you, harder now. Then I'll meet them standing up, I said. Or as close as I can get. On Thursday morning, my granddaughter, Eva, showed up. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She used to spend summers with me. As a child, nights filled with popcorn and bedtime stories. But as she grew older, her visits grew shorter, then stopped entirely. She stood in the doorway like someone unsure whether they were welcome. "Hi, Nana," she said. I nodded slowly. "Hello, Eva." She came in holding a coffee and a small bag, sat down beside me, and didn't speak for a while. "I saw the post," she finally said. I raised an eyebrow. "Dad posted a picture of you. Said you were being influenced. Said you didn't know what you were doing." I said, "Nothing." Eva looked down. "But I remember. You used to read me poetry and make French toast when I couldn't sleep. You were always the sharpest person in any room." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry I stopped coming. I don't know why. I guess Dad said you were getting difficult." I reached out, slow but deliberate, and took her hand. "It's not too late," I said. "But you have to decide for yourself who I am." Eva squeezed back. "I already have." That night, I lay in bed longer than usual, listening to the ticking of the wall clock and Carla's soft footsteps outside the curtain. There was peace in that sound. Real, earned peace. I'd spent so much of my life afraid to take up space, to be inconvenient, to say no. Now, in this hospital bed, surrounded by the gentle ache of age and the rustle of legal envelopes, I felt more present than I had in years. If death was coming, it would find me resolved, not erased. The next morning, the hospital chaplain came to my room, uninvited. "I was asked to check on you," he said gently. "By your family." I motioned to the only chair and gave a weary smile. "You mean my son wants a second opinion from someone who wears a collar instead of a coat?" The chaplain didn't argue. He was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and shoes too shiny for a weekday visit. He folded his hands on his lap, the silence between us patient. "Sometimes," he said after a pause, "families get scared when control shifts." "Control," I repeated. "Is that what they're calling it now?" He didn't flinch. "Grief doesn't always look like sorrow. It can look like anger, confusion, even entitlement." That one landed. "I'm not grieving him," I said. "He's alive. He just stopped seeing me as someone who could say no." The chaplain nodded. "And now that you are, he's afraid he'll be remembered for how he left me," I said. "Not for any of the good that came before. He didn't try to console me with scripture. That was something I respected. Instead, he asked, 'Do you want peace?'" I turned my head toward the window, where sunlight streaked across the sill. "I don't want peace. I want to be remembered with accuracy." He gave a slow nod, stood, and offered a quiet "God be with you" before leaving. After he was gone, I leaned back, exhausted, but clear. Even now, they were trying to paint me as someone broken, irrational, emotionally unstable. But I'd made every decision with more clarity than I'd had in years. By mid-afternoon, Carla returned with news. "Your lawyer called," she said, placing her phone on the tray. "He wants to meet, but not here." "Where then?" "There's a mediation center near the courthouse. Neutral ground." He said, "It's better if you're the one who initiates contact now." Michael's lawyer reached out first. I looked down at my hands, spotted and thin, but steady. "So they're trying to beat me to it." Carla nodded. "But they're on the defensive now. Your son's pushing a narrative of elder exploitation." I exhaled through my nose, "And yet, the only one who's exploited me in the last year has his name on the family Christmas card." The hospital granted me a 4-hour discharge window. I wore a donated cardigan over my hospital gown and traded my blanket for a proper coat. Carla wheeled me down herself, her hand resting lightly on the chair's handlebar. "You ready for this?" she asked at the curb. "No," I said honestly. "But I'm ready for it to be over." James met us inside the center, a modest office tucked behind a law firm. He looked older than I remembered, though it had only been a year since I'd updated my will. A man like him carried the wear of other people's stories. "Glad you came in," he said. "They've filed a preliminary motion. It's weak, but we have to answer." "And Carla?" I asked. "She's not being dragged into this, is she?" "She's protected," he said. "And if they try, we counter. You have detailed documentation, timelines, witness logs, and your medical capacity letters. They don't have a case, just smoke." He laid out the action plan, file the will immediately through his office, have a formal declaration of mental capacity submitted from the hospital, and prepare for an emergency injunction if Michael attempted to freeze any of my accounts. I signed what I needed to sign, asked what I needed to ask. At the end, James smiled faintly. You've done more than most people your age would dare to. You should know that. I adjusted the coat. I was always polite, but never soft. Back in my hospital room, Carla helped me change into a fresh gown and blanket. You okay? She asked, easing me into the bed. I'm fine, I said. Just one thing left to do. I reached under my pillow and pulled out a small stack of photos I'd been hiding. Snapshots of my life. Me and Frank on our wedding day. Michael at 5 with chocolate on his cheeks. Eva at the beach, holding a shell. I want these scanned, I told Carla. Put them in the cloud, label them, dates, locations, names. She blinked. Why? Because the story doesn't end here, I said. And they don't get to edit the past just because they're embarrassed by the present. She took the photos with both hands. I'll do it tonight. That night, the lights were dimmed, and a light rain tapped the window pane like memory. I asked Carla to stay a little longer before her shift ended. She pulled up the chair beside me, the red folder now locked in her bag. I used to think legacy was about wealth, I said, passing something down, but I was wrong. What is it then? Legacy is who fights for your dignity when you can't. She looked down. You've given me more than anyone ever has. You gave it first, I said, just by showing up. She rested her hand on mine. You're not alone anymore. And for once, I believed it. 3 days after the mediation, the flowers arrived. Not real ones, those at least would have had a scent. These were pale blue silk orchids in a plastic vase with a sticker on the bottom that still read $7.99. The attached card was unsigned but tight. We're thinking of you. Let's not make this ugly. I left them untouched on the windowsill. They belonged beside the kind of window that never opened and offered a view of only brick. Decorative, artificial, just like the gesture. Carla saw them and said nothing. But later that evening, I noticed she'd moved the vase behind the curtain, just out of sight. She was good at that, protecting me without making it obvious. The next morning, Eva returned. No coffee this time, just herself. She slipped in quietly while Carla was reviewing my chart and stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, holding a brown leather notebook. I brought the journal you gave me, she said. My eyes widened. You kept that? I did. I wrote in it, off and on, whenever I didn't know how to say things out loud. She walked over and handed it to me. I flipped it open and saw my handwriting on the first page. Write what matters, even if it scares you. Eva sat down beside me. I read the article, she said. The one Dad's lawyer leaked. It's everywhere. Nurse accused of exploiting elderly widow. They didn't even get your name right. I met her eyes. Did you believe it? No, she said immediately. But I know a lot of people will, especially family. I nodded slowly. That's always been Michael's talent, telling just enough truth to make the lie feel familiar. She looked down at her hands. They're saying you've been manipulated, that you changed the will because you were confused. Do I seem confused to you? I asked. No, she said. You seem like the first adult who's told me the truth in years. There it was, that sharp, beautiful ache. I didn't cry, but the emotion sat like a warm stone in my chest. Not heavy, grounding. That afternoon, the hospital administrator requested a meeting. The room they brought me to was cold, with laminate furniture and a ticking clock louder than necessary. A woman named Dana sat across from me, flanked by a compliance officer and a clipboard. We're not accusing anyone of misconduct, she began. But due to recent publicity and a formal complaint filed by your son, we're obligated to open an internal review of Nurse Carla's conduct. My voice was quiet, but firm. Am I allowed to speak freely? Dana nodded. I took a breath. Your nurse has done nothing but keep me alive, literally and figuratively. She's the only reason I didn't give up after my first stroke. She's fed me, washed me, protected my privacy, and given me the dignity your own staff forgot to offer. There was a flicker of discomfort across Dana's face. The clipboard remained motionless. If you penalize her because a man's ego couldn't handle his mother reclaiming her voice, you're complicit in erasing women like me, I continued. Women who become inconvenient the second we stop playing along. Dana folded her hands. We'll take your statement into consideration. I'll give it under oath, I said, in any courtroom that will have me. That was the first time the compliance officer made eye contact. When Carla visited me later that evening, her smile was thinner than usual. I told her everything. They've opened an inquiry. I said. She sighed, but didn't look surprised. I've seen this happen before. Family waves around power, and suddenly my care becomes suspect. You didn't do anything wrong, I told her. She glanced toward the window, as if steeling herself. That doesn't always matter. Perception sticks. Especially in this line of work. I reached for her hand. Then I'll change the perception. How? She asked. By speaking the truth louder than they speak their fear. She didn't say anything, but she didn't let go of my hand either. 2 days later, a package arrived for me. Hand delivered, no return address. Inside was a stack of photographs, printed, glossy, with curled edges. All of them were from my house, the one Michael had moved into after Frank passed. Shots of my bedroom, emptied out, furniture removed, closets open. The house staged like I'd already died. The last photo was of my wedding portrait, removed from its frame and set aside on the floor. I turned the picture over. One sentence was scrawled on the back in ink that had bled through the paper. This isn't yours anymore. I handed the stack to Carla without a word. She looked through them and cursed under her breath, something I'd never heard her do before. I'll call James, she said, but I shook my head. Not yet. Why? Because this isn't a war anymore. It's an unveiling. They're showing me who they've become. I leaned back and pulled the blanket up around my shoulders. And I want the whole world to see it too. The night after the photographs arrived, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from clarity. I kept picturing my old bedroom, gutted and dressed in catalog furniture, stripped of memory like it was never mine. The very walls I painted with Frank, the same ones that held our wedding photo, our son's kindergarten drawings, were now props in someone else's fantasy. They were trying to erase me before I was gone. And that, more than any insult or silence, was what lit the final match. By morning I was sitting up in bed, fully dressed in a clean hospital gown and my plaid blanket wrapped tight. I asked Carla to bring me my tablet. You sure you're ready for this? She asked, gently setting it on the tray table. More than ready, I said. It's time they heard from me. I had never used social media for anything more than liking church bake sale posts and reading Eva's updates from college. But I knew how to write, and I knew how to tell the truth. I opened a blank post and began typing. I didn't draft it, didn't edit. I wrote it exactly the way it came out. My name is Helen Newen. I am 82 years old. I raised a son who once kissed my scraped knees and now wants to erase my existence, for profit. I gave him everything. Money, care, time. When I had my stroke, he moved me into his house and called it love. When I got inconvenient, he started clearing me out, like old furniture. When I didn't die fast enough, he asked why I was still alive. So I rewrote my will, not out of anger, out of self-respect, and I gave it to the only person who still treated me like I mattered, my nurse. She didn't ask, she didn't push, she just showed up. Now they're calling her a thief, and me a confused old woman. I'm neither. I'm a mother who woke up, and I won't be silent anymore. I read it over once, then hit post. I expected quiet fallout. Maybe a few messages, maybe a ripple in our church group chat. What I didn't expect was 900 shares in 3 hours. Hundreds of comments, messages from strangers, many of them older women, some younger daughters, some nurses who had seen it all. You are the voice we needed. My mother died in silence. I wish she'd had your courage. I believe you, and I see you. I had never been seen by so many people, not even at my own retirement party. Eva texted an hour later. Nana, you broke the internet, and I'm so proud of you. Carla stood beside me, stunned. You've started something, she said. This isn't just a story anymore. No, I said. It's a mirror. Michael called. Twice. I let it ring. Then he texted. You're being reckless. You don't understand the damage you're doing. A second later. We can still make this right. Just take the post down. He still thought this was about negotiation. I replied with 3 words. I'm not afraid. Later that afternoon, the hospital legal team came to my room. Dana again, along with a different compliance officer, and now a PR rep. They had seen the post, and they weren't angry. They were panicked. We've received over 400 voicemails in the last 6 hours, Dana said, voice flat. Some accusing us of mistreatment, some threatening protests. Sounds like people are listening, I said. We need to release a statement, she continued. And we'd like to include your voice if you're open to it. Maybe a short video, clarifying that you're okay, that you're safe, that our staff, especially Nurse Carla, has acted with the utmost care. You want to use me, I said, to stop the bleeding. There was an uncomfortable pause. Yes, she admitted. I looked at Carla. She looked exhausted. She'd carried this weight alone for weeks. All right, I said, but I'll write the script. The video was filmed just after sunset. A soft ring light was clipped to the bed rail. The camera was a hospital tablet, propped on a small tripod. One take, no edits. I spoke directly into the lens. If you're watching this, you've probably read my words already. I stand by everyone. I am not afraid, and I am not confused. I am angry, but not at the hospital. I'm angry at a world that expects elderly women to disappear quietly. I'm still here. I'm still thinking. I'm still choosing, and I choose to leave my legacy where it will be honored, not harvested. If that makes me difficult, so be it. If that makes me dangerous, then good. The video was posted that evening. By morning, it had 200,000 views. That night, I slept. Really slept. Not the medicated kind or the grief-numbed dozing. I drifted off with the window cracked, just enough to hear the wind, my hands resting on my lap, a folded photo of Frank tucked under my blanket. For the first time in a long time, I dreamed of my house. Not staged, not empty, but whole. Frank at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. Young Michael, in the hallway, scuffed shoes and a crooked smile, and me at the stove, humming a tune I forgot, I knew. I woke to the sound of soft applause. Carla stood at the door, phone in hand. You made national news, she said, barely containing a smile. They quoted your line, the one about choosing where to leave your legacy. I smiled back. Good. Maybe someone else will choose differently now too. They say power is loud, but they're wrong. Real power is quiet. It sits. It watches. It waits until the moment it no longer needs permission to speak. That morning, the silence in my hospital room was a different kind. Dense, thoughtful. The kind that comes after the storm, when even the air seems to understand something has changed. Eva arrived just before breakfast with her laptop in one hand and a paper bag in the other. Almond croissant, she said, placing it on my tray. From the place you like. They still remembered your name. I smiled. Genuinely. I'm surprised that little cafe is still there. They said the same about you, she said, grinning as she pulled up a chair. We ate together. Me slowly. Her between emails, the nurse dropped by, but barely spoke. The room felt different now, as if I had stopped being a patient and started being something else. A figure. A symbol. A story that no one could file away. Eva turned her screen toward me. I set up a page, a fund, for elder care workers, people like Carla. I blinked, touched. Why? Because the world saw your story, Nana. But they also saw what Carla did. And no one protects the ones who carry us. I looked at the page. It already had 500 donors. By noon, the hospital held a press conference in the main atrium. I watched it on the mounted television across from my bed. Dana stood in front of the podium, flanked by staff in pressed scrubs, reading from a statement that sounded practiced, but not insincere. Reaffirmed that Miss Helen Lowen was never declared medically incompetent and that Nurse Carla Montgomery acted at all times within the ethical standards of care. I muted the rest. I didn't need to hear the words again. What mattered was the camera lens, the acknowledgement, the fact that silence was no longer an option. Carla stepped in a few minutes later. They cleared me, she said softly. Officially. I took her hand. It's what you deserved all along. She looked down, visibly relieved, but also tired. The kind of tired that doesn't sleep off. The kind that comes from carrying someone else's dignity without complaint. Eva's setting up something in your name, I added. Carla frowned. For me? For people like you, I said. But yes, you're the spark. She sat beside me, quiet for a long time. Then, I almost quit last year. What stopped you? A woman who taught me how to fold linens without creases, she said. And said thank you, like it meant something. We both laughed gently. It felt like breathing after a long cough. Late afternoon brought an email, from James, my lawyer. Subject: Ray, probate dispute. Withdrawn. Body: Helen. Michael's attorney has withdrawn the claim against the will. No countermotion. No lawsuit. They're walking away. Quietly. You did it. James. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not in disbelief, but in recognition. Michael hadn't lost because I had more power. He lost because he gambled that I wouldn't use it. I handed the tablet to Carla. She read the message twice, then looked up at me. You're free. Yes, I said. And finally, seen. That night, I wrote again. This time, not for the internet. Not for Eva, or Carla, or the hospital. Just for myself. They underestimated my will. Not the document, but the part of me that survives the dismissal. They mistook my stillness for surrender. My quiet for confusion. But I have never spoken louder than when I stopped asking to be loved, and chose instead to be respected. The next morning was still and golden. The light through the blinds painted long stripes across my blanket. The birds outside, who must have nested in the gutter, sang like they knew the whole story. Eva brought me tea. Carla joined us for 5 minutes before rounds. There was no drama, no tension, just life. I pulled a small box from under the bed and handed it to Carla. What's this? She asked. Something old, something real. She opened it slowly. Inside was my wedding ring, tucked in velvet beside a folded note. It was Frank's, I said. And mine. We wore them for 42 years. She looked unsure. I can't. It's not for wearing, I interrupted. It's for remembering. You're part of that now. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Neither did I. Some moments deserve silence. Eva stayed behind that afternoon to help me write replies. The messages had piled up, hundreds, maybe more. Women in small towns, nurses in underfunded clinics, daughters who regretted being too late. One stood out. I saw your story, and I called my mother. We hadn't spoken in 7 years. I just wanted you to know, she answered. I read it twice. I don't want a statue, I said aloud. Eva looked up. No one's building one. Good. Let the work live in them, not in stone. As the sun lowered, I took one last look at the hospital room. The IV pole, the tray table, the chair where Carla always sat. And I realized this place, this sterile room, with its beige walls and humming machines, had become something sacred. Not because it was safe, but because I reclaimed something here that I hadn't touched in years. Myself. I didn't think anything else could surprise me, but the letter did. It came that evening, folded neatly inside a plain white envelope left at the nurse's station, with no sender. Carla found it when she was checking out for the night. She placed it on my tray without a word, her brows pulled into a quiet crease. There was no return address, no signature on the envelope, just my full name, spelled correctly, in handwriting I hadn't seen since before the stroke. I opened it slowly, expecting cruelty. Another dig. Another veiled threat, dressed in politeness. But as my eyes moved down the page, my hands went still. It was from Michael. I read everything. I watched the video. You said I erased you. You were right. I thought if I could control the ending, it wouldn't feel like I'd lost you. I was wrong. You were slipping away long before the will, and instead of reaching for you, I built walls. I called it management. It was fear. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask, but I needed you to know. I was never angry you lived. I was angry I didn't know how to care for you when you did. I stopped reading. Not because I couldn't finish, but because the words didn't need finishing. They had already done their work. That night, I didn't show the letter to Carla. I folded it, placed it under my pillow, and let the silence settle. Forgiveness is a strange thing at my age. It no longer feels like a favor. It feels like release, like setting down a stone I've been carrying long after the climb ended. But I wasn't ready to reply. Not yet. The next morning, Eva found me already sitting up, sipping lukewarm tea, the sunlight streaking across the floor like gold ribbons. You're up early, she said. Old habits, I murmured. And an unexpected letter. I handed it to her without a word. She read it once, and then again, her lips pressed into a tight, unreadable line. He's trying, she said finally. Yes, I answered, but trying doesn't undo the doing. Eva didn't defend him. She didn't explain him. She simply nodded and handed the letter back. I'm not angry anymore, I added, but I don't owe him the ending he wants. That part's mine now. By mid-morning, the hospital's media team asked if I'd consider doing one final interview, not for damage control this time, but for something larger, a feature, a profile on elder dignity. They wanted to tell the story that had resonated beyond what any of them expected. At first I said no, not because I was afraid, because I was full. I had said what needed saying. I had acted. I had been seen. But later, while Carla helped comb my hair behind my ears, smoothing the wisps like she always did when she thought I wasn't paying attention, I changed my mind. Let them film, I said. She smiled. You sure? I want the last picture to be real, not staged, not afraid. The crew came with soft voices and slower movements, as if worried the sound of their cameras might break me. I appreciated the care, but I didn't need it. I sat upright in my bed, wrapped in my blanket, hair freshly brushed, a small brooch from Eva pinned to the collar of my gown. The red folder sat on the side table, closed now, its weight no longer burdensome, its contents no longer secret. They asked simple questions. What would you say to others in your position? What do you want to be remembered for? If your son sees this, what would you hope he hears? I didn't answer everything. Some things belong to silence. But I said enough. More than enough. And when the lights dimmed and the room emptied again, I leaned back into the pillow and closed my eyes. Not from fatigue. From peace. Carla came in with a warm compress from my hands, stiff, from writing, from holding. You good? She asked, settling beside me. I am, I said. I feel finished. Finished? She repeated. Not dead, I said with a quiet smile. Just no longer unraveling. She took my hand gently. You tied every thread back together. I turned toward her, looked at her face, creased from long shifts, soft around the eyes, worn with service. I hope one day someone fights for you like you fought for me, I said. She didn't speak. She just nodded and held my hand a little tighter. That night, I wrote one final thing in my notebook. If I'm gone tomorrow, know that I didn't disappear. I chose my voice. I chose my end. I chose the nurse who stayed. The day after the interview, the hospital brought in a therapy dog. I didn't ask for it, but Carla said it was part of some patient morale initiative. The dog's name was Jasper, an aging golden retriever with stiff hips and cloudy eyes that mirrored my own. He patted in, tail wagging gently, and laid his chin on the edge of my bed like he'd been waiting for me his whole life. I didn't cry, but my fingers lingered longer than expected in his fur. I forgot what softness felt like. I whispered. Carla leaned against the wall with a smile, arms crossed. He likes you. Probably smells all the guilt I've let go, I said. She chuckled. Or maybe he just knows a survivor when he sees one. Later that morning, Eva returned with a surprise. You've been invited, she said, holding up her phone, to speak, in person. I blinked. Speak? Where? At a conference. A panel on aging and autonomy. It's in 3 months. I won't be walking in 3 months, I said, voice level. Eva sat beside me. That's why they offered to record a message, but I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd want to go, in person. Just once. Be more than a screen. I looked out the window, the sunlight catching the edges of the ivy pole beside me. To be honest, I don't know if I'll still be here. Eva reached for my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. But you're here now. And they want to hear you now. We'll make it happen, even if I have to wheel you through an airport like royalty. I smiled, faintly. You just want an excuse to push me through TSA. Her grin widened. And you love the drama. That afternoon, I agreed. Not because I thought I'd live long enough, but because I wanted to. That was the shift. Wanting again. I hadn't realized how long I'd gone without wanting anything that wasn't practical. For years, I only wanted rest, escape, relief. But now, I wanted to be somewhere. Do something. Be seen. Not just in defense, but in declaration. So we made a plan. Carla would help arrange physical therapy. Eva would book the tickets and set reminders. I would do the hard part, believe in the possibility. A week passed, my strength fluctuated, but my voice didn't. The video interview aired on a Sunday morning broadcast. They played it right before the local news segment about spring flower festivals, soft lighting, subtle piano score. And there I was, an old woman, in a blanket, speaking about agency, choice, and the cost of staying quiet. It reached more people than they expected, and the responses weren't pitying. They were protective, fierce, respectful. I want to be like her when I grow old. She reminded me my mother's voice still matters. I called my grandmother after watching this, just to say thank you. It wasn't celebrity. It was impact. And that felt holier. Michael never responded to my letter. I didn't expect him to. But one afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Carla answered for me, thinking it was another reporter. She handed me the phone. "It's your niece, Melanie." I hadn't spoken to Melanie in over 10 years. She lived 2 states away. Her voice, though older, sounded the same, like wind through leaves. "Aunt Helen," she said, "I saw everything. And I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not letting them write you out. For staying loud." We talked for 30 minutes about her kids, about her job, about how I used to bring her cinnamon sticks when she had a sore throat as a child. "I never forgot that," she said. Neither had I. Carla surprised me the next day with something wrapped in tissue paper. I unfolded it slowly and gasped. It was a shawl, knit by hand, soft gray with a single stripe of red running through the edge. "I didn't make it," she said. "My mom did, said it looked like something you'd wear." "She's right," I said, tracing the pattern with my fingers. "Consider it armor," she added, "for when we get you on that stage." I looked up. "You're coming?" She nodded. "If you're brave enough to go, I'm brave enough to stand beside you." That evening, I opened my notebook again and wrote only one sentence. Let this be the chapter where the woman they underestimated becomes the woman they quote. Then I closed the book and held the shawl to my cheek. Warmth. Not just from the yarn, from the people who had become family, not through blood, but through choice. There's something about being believed that heals deeper than any medicine. Not instantly, and not always physically, but in a place that doesn't show up on charts. By the end of that week, I noticed I was holding my teacup with steadier fingers. My legs didn't tremble quite as much when I stood to use the walker, and I started wearing real slippers again. The blue ones with the embroidery Eva got me 2 Christmases ago. It wasn't recovery in the way doctors measure it, but it was resurrection in the ways that matter. One morning, while Carla helped me adjust the strap on my blood pressure cuff, I asked, "Do you think it's possible to grow stronger just from being seen?" She paused, tugged the Velcro into place, and smiled. "Absolutely. It's the first step to not fading." Later that day, I received a letter from the director of the Elder Care Advocacy Board, a real letter on thick paper, signed in. They wanted to establish a grant in my name, the Helen Lowen Legacy Fund, to support women over 65 facing housing insecurity or medical neglect. Not just a nameplate. A ripple. I stared at the envelope for a long time after reading it, then passed it to Eva, who sat across from me, sketching out a speech draft for the conference. She blinked. "Nana, you're going to outlive us all." "I don't want to outlive anyone," I said quietly. "I just want to outlast the version of me they tried to bury." A few nights later, I found myself awake at 2 a.m. Not from pain, but from something subtler, a kind of humming under the surface of my thoughts. The moonlight came in through the blinds in silver bars, touching the far edge of the red folder still sitting untouched on the side table. I reached for it, opened it slowly, and removed a smaller envelope tucked in the back. One I hadn't shown anyone. It was a final draft of a letter I'd written to Frank 5 months after his death, and never mailed to anyone. Of course, but sometimes you write not to deliver, but to release. I still reach for you at night. Not because I think you're there, but because I want to remember what presence feels like. They talk about memory loss, like it's a curse, but I've found forgetting is easier than carrying some things too long. I hope wherever you are, you know I've kept going, even on the days I didn't want to, even when the people we raised forgot how we taught them. I refolded the letter, held it against my chest, and whispered, "I did it, Frank. I got free." In the days that followed, preparations began for the trip to the conference. Carla arranged with the hospital's administrator to take time off. Eva coordinated every detail, wheelchairs at both airports, a hotel suite with a private nurse on standby, and even an escort to bypass long security lines. "You're spoiling me," I teased. "You deserve to be spoiled," she replied. "Besides, This isn't about comfort, it's about you standing figuratively on that stage. I nodded, but inside I wondered if my body would cooperate. Still, the packing began. Eva brought a suitcase and laid out options on the bed. My navy blouse, with the tiny buttons, the black skirt I wore to her graduation, a scarf with gold embroidery I didn't remember owning. "Do you think it's too much?" she asked. "No," I said. "For once, let them see me dressed in dignity." Carla added a touch of lavender oil to the lining and helped wrap my medication in labeled bags. "This is happening," she said. "You're going." And for the first time, I believed it too. The night before the flight, Eva helped me shower and braid my hair loosely back. We sat side by side in the room, reading messages aloud from people who had donated to the fund. Most were small, $10, $20, but a few came with stories. "My mother died in hospice, unheard. Thank you for reminding me to listen. I'm a nurse. We carry so many stories like yours. Now the world has a name for one of them. Because of you, I checked in on my neighbor. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. It was overwhelming, not in volume, but in the weight of what connection could do. I never asked for this," I whispered. "No," Eva said, taking my hand. "But you never turned away from it either." That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no ghosts, just quiet. And when I woke to the sound of the luggage wheels zipping shut, I knew something inside me had already made the journey. The airport was louder than I remembered. Even from the comfort of the wheelchair, with Carla on one side and Eva on the other, the swarm of announcements, luggage wheels, and hurried footsteps moved around me like a separate world I'd once belonged to, but no longer needed. And yet, there I was, wrapped in my soft plaid blanket, the shawl with the red stripe draped around my shoulders like quiet armor, waiting at gate B19 for a flight I wasn't supposed to live long enough to take. Carla leaned down, her voice low. "Still want to do this?" I looked up at the large windows ahead, where sunlight poured across the terminal floor and aircraft drifted slowly along the tarmac like sea creatures through clouds. "I'm tired," I said. "But yes." Eva returned from the counter, carrying a bottled tea and a boarding pass. She refused to let me hold. "They've confirmed early boarding. We'll go right after the pre-boards." She crouched beside me and grinned. "You're about to be the most important woman on that plane." "I already am," I said, deadpan, and she burst out laughing. The flight was smoother than expected. I was worried about the pressure in my ears, the way my joints would feel after hours of stillness. But Eva had arranged everything: pillows, warm socks, pre-cut snacks. Carla sat beside me and kept my tea warm with a little thermos. She packed herself. "You know," she said over the hum of the engine, "I've taken patients to all kinds of places, but never one who flew into the spotlight." I smiled. "Well, let's hope the spotlight has a good seat cushion." Mid-flight, I looked out the window. The sky was clean and infinite. I thought of Frank, of the last time we flew, Vegas 1994, a trip booked on whim, when we were still young enough to mistake spontaneity for bravery. "Do you think he'd be proud?" I asked softly. Carla didn't hesitate. "He'd be in the seat behind you, pointing at everyone and saying, 'That's my wife up there.'" The image made me laugh quietly, so much that my chest shook a little. "I hope, wherever he is," I said, "he's got the best view." When we landed, a hotel representative met us at the terminal with a sign that read "Helen Yellen, keynote guest." It felt surreal, watching strangers who once might have ignored me now hold space for my voice like it carried weight. The hotel was tall and beige, with a fountain that gurgled like it wanted to be impressive, but I didn't care for the decor. It was the small things that moved me. A handwritten note in the suite welcoming me, a fresh lavender sachet on the pillow, Carla unpacking the suitcase with care, Eva hanging the blouse we'd chosen for the conference. That evening, I sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the skyline. It glowed orange and pink, fading into dusk like a page curling at the corner. Eva pulled over the second chair and sat beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I keep thinking I should be nervous," I said, "but all I feel, like I've already said everything. This is just the echo." "Maybe echoes are what some people need," she said, "to hear it twice before they believe it." I took her hand. "Then let's make sure it rings." The morning of the conference, Carla helped me dress slowly. The navy blouse, the long skirt, the shawl. I'd brought my notebook too, though I wouldn't read from it. I just wanted it close. A piece of the journey that had carried me here. Eva helped pin the microphone to my collar, her hands trembling slightly. I'm more nervous than you are, she laughed. That's because you still care what people think, I teased. But inside, I understood. This wasn't just my moment. It was hers, too. They wheeled me onto the stage during the opening panel. The lights were softer than I expected. The chairs curved in a semicircle facing a sea of eyes. Hundreds, maybe more. The moderator gave a warm introduction. She didn't list my medical records or describe me as frail. She said I was an elder, a fighter, a voice that had made people remember their mothers. Then she asked, Mrs. Lowen, if you could say one thing to the next generation about growing older, what would it be? I didn't need the notebook. I leaned slightly forward in my chair, placed my hands in my lap, and said, don't let them mistake your silence for surrender. And when your time comes to speak, don't ask for permission. Just be. There was a pause, a hush, and then applause. Not loud or frenzied, but steady, lasting, like rain on a roof. Gentle, certain. I didn't smile to charm them. I smiled because I had nothing left to prove. After the panel, people lined up, nurses, daughters, elders in wheelchairs, caregivers, holding tired hands. They didn't want autographs, they just wanted to thank me. One woman, maybe in her 70s, leaned in and whispered, I was almost gone. You reminded me I still have something to say. Another simply pressed a folded paper into my hand and walked away. Later I opened it. I'm not invisible. I'm just waiting for someone to see me. That night, back in the suite, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in the shawl, the city glittering below. Carla brought tea. Eva, curled up at my feet with a blanket. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. I didn't expect a letter from Michael to be waiting. When I returned to the hospital, it wasn't dramatic, no signature of regret dipped in sorrow or embellished with metaphors, just a plain envelope slid under my hospital room door, sometime between my discharge from the hotel and the soft clatter of my return. The handwriting on the front was familiar, smaller now, as if unsure of its own presence. I didn't open it right away. I placed it next to the red folder, my old companion, and left it there, untouched for the remainder of the afternoon. Carla noticed. You going to read it? Eventually I said, but not because I need to. Because I choose to. There's a difference between forgiveness offered freely and forgiveness begged for out of consequence. I wanted to be sure which one he was asking for. The following morning, the news had picked up footage from the panel. A brief segment, 30 seconds maybe. Enough to show me on stage, speaking the now recycled line about silence not being surrender. My voice had become a quote, something to be captioned, shared. And yet, I didn't feel inflated by it. I felt resolved. Like a drawer, finally closed, after years of being left ajar. Eva returned from her short work trip late that day. She kissed my cheek, placed her laptop on the tray table, and pulled out a white paper bag from the bookstore downstairs. I brought you something. I unwrapped it, slowly. A hardcover journal, with my name embossed on the cover, too pretty to write in, I said. Exactly why you should, she replied. That evening, after dinner, I finally opened Michael's letter. Mom. I didn't know how to say any of this while everyone else was watching. I thought if I spoke, it would sound like an apology carved out of pressure, not truth. But here it is anyway. I was wrong. About how I treated you. About what I thought you owed me. I've spent months convincing myself that you were confused, so I wouldn't have to admit that I had abandoned the very woman who raised me. I don't want the house. I don't want the inheritance. I don't want anything you don't want to give. I want to learn how to be a son again. If that door hasn't closed forever. I'll understand if it has. Michael, I didn't cry, but my chest tightened, not from sadness, but from the quiet recognition that even now, growth was possible. And perhaps that was the most bittersweet part of it all. Carla came in shortly after, catching me with the letter in hand. You okay? I nodded, better than I thought I'd be. She moved to close the blinds. The sun was setting in long streaks of orange and pale purple, casting light across the side of my face. He's trying, I said softly. Carla didn't press. She sat beside me and waited. I don't know if we'll ever be close again, I continued. But maybe that's not the point. She glanced over. Maybe the point is I stopped waiting for an apology to feel whole, I said, and when it finally came, I didn't need it anymore. The next day, the hospital informed me that someone had made a donation to the ward in my name, enough to restock all the shared rooms with newer gowns, warm blankets, and replacement medical pads. I asked who it was from. The receptionist smiled. Anonymous. But the note said, "In honor of the woman who reminded us how to care." I didn't need to guess. Some things don't require names to be understood. Later that week, a nurse I'd never met came by during her night shift. Young, a little tired-looking, with the kind of face that has seen more than it says. She stood at the foot of the bed. "I hope this isn't weird," she began, "but I watched your talk twice." I smiled. "It's only weird if you quote me." She laughed. "I just wanted to say, I was planning to quit. Tomorrow, actually. Had my notice typed out and everything. I felt like I wasn't making a difference anymore, that no one cared if I showed up." I sat up a little straighter. "And now?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I'll show up a little longer, just to see what happens." She left before I could say anything more. But she didn't need my words, she'd found her own. That evening, I pulled out the new journal Eva gave me. I wrote one line on the first page. This life wasn't loud, but it echoed. And then I sat back and watched the hospital lights outside blink one by one across the parking lot, like tiny stars reclaiming their glow. I used to believe the world ended quietly for people like me. Not with tragedy or spectacle, but in a slow fade, like the dimming of a hallway light no one noticed had gone out. But the truth is, my life didn't dim. It shifted, it folded inward and opened up again. By the time spring returned, I had outlived the narrative others wrote for me. They moved me to a different room, sunny, quieter, with a view of the garden below. On good days, Carla wheeled me to the terrace, and we'd sit among the potted rosemary and lemon balm, watching the bees flirt with the blossoms. "I should have been planting," I said one morning, wrapping the shawl tighter around my shoulders. "I wasted so many years tending to things that couldn't bloom." Carla smiled, without speaking. She was always at her best in stillness. Behind us, patients shuffled in and out, staff moved with practiced grace, and life did what it always did. It went on. Eva came by every afternoon now. She brought her laptop, journals, and a rotating stack of books she claimed I had to read before the next season started. One day, she pulled up a document on her screen titled "Lessons from Helen: How an 82-year-old Woman Taught Us to Listen." "I want to publish this," she said. "Not just your story, but what it made possible." I stared at the title for a moment, then shook my head. "Call it something else. Something about them. I didn't teach anyone. They just finally remembered how to hear." She paused. "How about the woman who stayed visible?" I smiled. "Now that feels true." Weeks passed. Not without pain. My body reminded me daily of the toll, but without fear. I had made peace with the truth that I would not return to who I was before the stroke, and I no longer wanted to. I wasn't the same woman who begged for space in the home I'd built. I wasn't the one who flinched when called a burden. I wasn't even the woman who posted a plea for dignity and found a viral revolution waiting on the other side. Now, I was simply Helen. Not a symbol, not a victim, not an echo of usefulness. Just Helen. One warm morning, I asked to go out into the garden. Not the terrace, the real one, downstairs. Eva and Carla exchanged a look, then arranged for it. The staff wheeled me through a side entrance and onto the small paved path that wound between rose bushes and daffodils. The air was fresh and scented with soil and new life. Children visiting grandparents waved from benches. A breeze rustled the tall grass. We stopped beneath a cherry blossom tree, in full bloom, its petals fluttering like slow pink confetti. "I think I remember this place," I murmured. "You were here your first week," Carla said. "Back when you still believed you had to be small." I closed my eyes, let the wind touch my cheeks. "I don't feel small anymore." They brought a picnic blanket and laid it across my lap. I sipped chamomile tea from a real cup, not the hospital kind. Eva sat cross-legged beside me, reading me notes people had left on the advocacy site. Carla wrote quietly in her own journal beside the bench. A nurse from another floor passed by and stopped. "Is this the Helen Lewin I looked up. She's around here somewhere. They laughed and nodded. My mom watched your talk, called me crying, said she said what I couldn't. So, thank you. I nodded once. Tell your mother she wasn't wrong, just early. As the sun climbed higher, I asked Eva to take a photo of us, the three of us, just as we were. No makeup, no staging. I didn't want it to be framed for beauty. I wanted it to be real. A woman who had once been erased, now fully in the frame. Click. Eva looked at it, then showed me. It wasn't perfect. I was pale. My eyes a bit glassy from the morning meds. My skin thinner than I remembered it being. But I saw something that hadn't been there before. Ease. Not victory. Not pride. Just ease. And that, I thought, is the truest kind of peace. I didn't think about what came next. Not in that moment. Not about the treatments I'd need to decline soon. Not about what Michael and I still hadn't said aloud. Not about where I'd be buried or how many names would show up on the headstone. I just sat there, under the tree, with two women who had chosen me and whom I had chosen in return. And I let the light stay on me for as long as it wanted.